TechTales 111. Good morning. Yesterday I received an email from a client saying that they're having trouble with a application that I had designed, created, sort of a Visual Basic application that uses Excel and does some processing for this client. We started this in 2008, and so I've managed it ever since then. In 2008, it cost them a few $1,000s for me to set this up. And then there's just been a little bit of tweaks or fixes here and there, a little bit of maintenance, not very much, but it was a really important advantage to them. I'm going to give you a little bit of an idea of the project. I have spoken briefly about it in prior videos, but that was some time ago. Here's a quick look at a little piece of the Visual Basic code. Let me zoom this out a little bit. And this has pages and pages of information. This piece right here, it has a documentation of copy payee's name. So that's what this section does. This section copies a payment amount. Up here is basically the command and control center, you might say, for doing this loop process. So while active cell, so while a certain condition exists, it's going to do this indented portion over and over and over. So I'm going to get a little deeper into that just to give an idea of what was wrong with the system that I needed to fix today. This is an entity, an organization, an institution that manages money for people who have been declared for one reason or another unable to manage their own money. And so the money comes into the bank, and the bank sends my client either a PDF or a text file. They send it both ways. We used to use the PDF version, and then we switched over to using the text version. So this text file has records for hundreds of deposits that are made for different people, or deposits that are made for hundreds of different people. I think it's hundreds. It might be less than 200. I'm not sure. I haven't looked at that number for a long time. It used to be, prior to 2008, what my client would do is they would receive this information from the bank late in the afternoon on the day before they are expected to be able to dole that money out to the recipients. And they don't actually give all that money out to the recipients. They pay the bills for them, and they essentially distribute an allowance for them. Typically, there's a long line of people waiting at their office to pick up actual money. So what they were doing is they would have 3 staff people come in about 5 o'clock in the morning to manually enter the information that was in these PDF files into QuickBooks. They would print out the PDF and work off of paper, look at the name, find the name in QuickBooks, enter the amount of the payment, the date of the payment, the amount of money that's being received, and do the recording of that in QuickBooks, and then go on to the next one. So they had 3 people doing this. They were managing 3 different cities of people with offices. They had branch offices, but they would do all the processing of this information here in Fresno. They would start at 5 a.m. and by 10 a.m. they would open their doors, and they were expected to be ready to go. So they were taking 4 to 5 hours for 3 people to do this. The big one was once a month on the first of the month, and then there was a processing that was a little smaller than that on the 3rd of the month, and then even smaller on the 15th of the month. So they're doing this 3 days out of the month. Of course, 2 of those didn't take as long as the one on the 1st. Once I had this system set up and running for them, they cut that down to 2 people that would do the processing, and it would take about 10 to 15 minutes each time that they had to process it, because it was all mostly automated. There are a few things the people had to do to make this happen. So yesterday they received an advanced email of the data, and now they've changed banks and they get the information a few days ahead of time so that they can test the procedure. So what happens is this procedure in Excel extracts the information from the source file, manipulates it into Excel spreadsheet, and manipulates it again into another sheet and another sheet and another sheet until it gets into the format that is needed by QuickBooks. So it's kind of like if you could imagine taking a pile of rubble and putting it through some kind of a sifter, and then another sifter, and then another sifter, to where you get down to the really fine grains of sand. That's kind of what this massaging this data through these different levels looks like. So they were getting an error message when they tested it yesterday, and it's an error message that we last saw, according to my notes, in September of 2019 it was. So this is 2 years later that we're having it again. And so I'm going to come over here and show a little bit more detail about this. This is Visual Basic for Applications, is the programming language that I use for this. So I wrote all of this programming code here. I'm not by any means an expert programmer, but I have done some programming in some different languages. And this is Visual Basic for Applications, meaning it's a programming language that can be used for doing things in Excel or Microsoft Word and pretty much all of the Microsoft products. But I've only used it for programming with Excel. So here's in green is a documentation, a comment, a note. Copy needed CVCB data into record variables. The CVCB is the abbreviation for the bank that's involved. And so we're going to copy the data that comes from the bank into the record variables. So while active cell row were less than the last row minus 39 rows, we're going to do all of this processing. So let's go all the way down to here for copy payee's name. So it looks at the current name N1 cell. Now this is basically a variable that identifies a location on the sheet, and I use names that are meaningful, that make some kind of sense to me. And it activates that cell. And then for the active cell, we want to set a range of A1 to D26. This is a relative address. So let's suppose the cell pointer in Excel is at row H, let's see, yeah, row 100, column A. And so that we're going to say that's the beginning. Now from that point, we want to call that A1. So we're going to go over 4 columns. That's A, B, C, D. You see D26 there. This is where I'm looking at right here. So we're going to go over and include 4 rows, and then we're going to go 4 columns. Then we're going to go down 26 rows. And that's what we want to consider the active range right now. So then within that range, we're going to search for the word payee followed by a colon. And then, let's see, I'm going to go down here a little bit. Then active cell offset. So we're going to take the active cell and we're going to offset by 0 columns and 3 rows. So we're going down. And then we're going to call that range A1. Then we're going to assign a variable name of the lowercase v is for variable, pay beneficiary name. So what I'm assigning to this variable is the name of the person who receives the money. And whatever the value is of the active cell, that person's name is there. We're going to assign that person's name to this variable. So this whole section here was called copy payee's name. And that's what it did with these few rows of code. And then the next thing we're going to do is copy the payment amount. Similarly, we're going to take a certain selection of cells and activate a selection and then find the word amount within that selection. Once we find that selection, we're going to look at an adjacent column. Now, I just realized up here when I said this wrong. This 0 would have been row 0, meaning we're going to stay on the same row. We're going to go to the third column because that's where we're going to find the name of the payee. The first column has the word payee in colon, and then the third column to the right of that is going to actually have that person's name. So that just gives you a little peek into the way that this coding works. I've got a couple other photos here. I'm not sure whether I'm going to talk through them or not. This is a little bit zoomed out. Over on the left-hand side, I can't point to the screen. I need to use my mouse. There's the Module 1, Module 2, Module 3. Right now, we're looking in a portion of Module 3. And then, oh, I see down here, I've created a watch. I want to watch for the pay beneficiary's name. And I just realized I got to blur the screen for the next photo because it reveals actually that person's name. I'm going to pause here for a moment. So I fixed this a little bit so I can show you this screen, but variable pay beneficiary name. I mentioned that variable up here. So what happens here is I can step through the program and it actually displays the current value of that. You can see that person's name begins with the letter S and ends with the letter O. And out here it's a type of string. Alphabetic characters is called a string in programming code. So once I discovered where the problem was, the error message in Excel gave me the opportunity to debug, and so then I could step through it item by item, and I can add expressions that I want to follow or track or see how they're set up, what values they are. I'm going to pause again for the next photo. Here I'm adding another expression that I want to watch. So this variable called payee, I want to watch for that. Now actually it was a mistake for me to enter that. I realized later that when I was entering payee, I took that from right here. But this is actual text in the document. That's not a variable name. So it was wrong of me to even set that up. And I'm going to pause again. So now I have several variables down here in the watches section. So as I step through the code, I can see what value is assigned to each of these, and it helps me figure out what is going wrong. Pausing again. And then here what I'm doing is I'm creating a toggle breakpoint. Now I've got my mouse is moving right now. I'm controlling that. The mouse that you see frozen there is the photo that I took from my client's computer. So I can press the F9 key to insert a toggle break. This purple reddish area here, I don't know if it comes through for you that color, but that is a toggle breakpoint. So what happens is when I initiate this, we call it a macro because that's how they initiate or run this code, is they run a macro. And when it reaches this point, it's going to do a break. It's going to pause the running of the code at that point so I can come here and see what values are being assigned to these variables. So this is a process of debugging that you may have heard that somebody has to debug a program. Well, this is a piece of how that is done. I'm going to pause again. Here's the actual error message that they were encountering. Now I've blurred out a whole bunch of sections on here to prevent displaying any private data. And this message right up here where I'm moving my mouse, Microsoft Visual Basic runtime error 91 object variable with block variable not set. And then I can hit the debug button and that'll take me over to the code and show me right the place in the code where it ran into a problem. And then I start trying to figure out why this happened. Well, this screen right here, I can show you why it happened. You see this highlighted area around here that's kind of highlighted in I don't know, you call it a gray. That was done by the Visual Basic for Applications code that I wrote. And it goes down several rows. And what the code is trying to do is it was trying to find the word payee followed by a colon. You might remember me pointing that out. The word payee followed by a colon. Here's an example of it right here. But that one is not inside this highlighted area. Well, the next occurrence of the word payee is on the very next line after the bottom of this highlighted area. So the code did not select enough rows in order to get the word payee. Now that's not because we weren't selecting enough rows really, it's because this data from the bank was anomalous. It was an outlier. It was an edge case. It was not supposed to be sent. Not really. And here's why. You see right here the amount of $0. Okay? Who gets $0 deposited to their account? This is basically a dummy transaction for a new recipient, and the bank just sent this through. It's a way of testing that the account works on their side. It messes up our side. So what we wound up deciding to do is that we can easily manually go look for $0 amounts because they're always at the top of this file. We're on row 56 right now, and this goes way down into the thousands. It happens near the beginning for whatever reason. So what we're going to do, what the staff is going to do is they're going to take a look at this file, the records at the top, if there's any ones with $0 amounts. Then they're going to delete all the rows from this receiver information title down to the row just above the next occurrence of receiver information. That's how they know that they have removed one complete segment or section. So that's what we did today, and then it worked just fine. And you know what, that's probably enough of that. Gives you a little bit of peek into what it looks like for Visual Basic for Applications programming work, and that is something that I also do. I enjoy it when that type of project comes along, but I don't have I don't want to be a programmer. Lots of time right on the keyboard, face to face with the computer screen. I'd rather be doing a wider variety of things instead of being so deep into one project. But that was a fun project. Once in a while I get to go back and revisit it to fix something that has gone wrong. So that's it for this Tech Tales. I hope that was useful. Have a great day. Catch you later. Goodbye.